Hey everybody, I'm Katallina, and today we're talking about episode 1 of The Strongest Magician in the Demon Lord's Army Was a Human. The first episode of the first show of summer 2024 is here, and while I'm sure you're all eager to discuss this and to really get into the topic, first off, since these are a crop of new shows, the first thing you probably want to know, potentially, is this show worth your time? And I'm here to tell you that yes, I thought this episode was pretty solid overall, and I actually quite enjoyed it. It wasn't quite as actiony or as gripping as I might have expected something to be if I was going to sing really high praises for it, but it's definitely competent and solid enough to actually warrant recommending it to people. I think this is something that's going to take a bit more time to get going, but it's not entirely the show's fault. It had a lot to go over. We're meeting all new characters, we're seeing a new situation, that sort of thing, and I think it did a really good job of giving us some kind of flavor or taste for what it's going to be. So, if you like fantasy, if you like isekai, if you like moral ambiguity as far as humans and demons interacting, this is definitely something I would recommend checking out because I thought that it was smartly done, the production's values seemed pretty solid, and overall I thought it was pretty good. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's actually get to the discussion proper. We're introduced to our main character, Ike, who is a commander of a group inside of the Demon Lord's army. And the interesting thing about Ike, in my opinion, one of the things that immediately stood out to me, is the reality that not only is Ike a human who is in disguise inside of this army, he also isn't the leader of this army. There's nothing protecting him or cloaking him in that way from actually being exposed and actually facing consequences for being what he is. He has his boss, who knows his secret, above him. And then he also has the Demon Lord above him, whom at the beginning of this episode he thinks is some terrifying, menacing man. And it's really funny to find out what the Demon Lord actually is. Not that I think she's necessarily any less menacing, but I mean, seeing her being this pink-haired girl and stuff probably does leave Ike with some interesting thoughts and questions. This show is marked with an isekai tag, which I'm assuming plays into the fact that Ike probably had a past life and probably remembers certain aspects of what it was like being a human, at least in general, in that past life. And he is using that as his measuring stick for being a human now. On the other hand, it seems interesting that his perception of what it means to be human might be actually kind of spotty and be a unreliable narration of what that actually means. Because at one point during the show, we hear him say that he should have executed the leaders or something, but he couldn't do it because that isn't what it means to be human. And while I can understand that kind of thought from an idealistic standpoint, I wonder how much we are actually going to see Ike find out as he engages in warfare against humans, how different that perception is from the reality he is likely to face. Because Ike's perception of what it means to be human may well be based off of living a more normal civilian life, whereas now he is actually a military leader, and that's probably going to have a very different set of effects. It's also something that kind of goes against some of the characters in this show who have helped him, and his possible presumptions about them. I mean, his grandfather figure who took him in, who raised him from being a baby, who taught him magic, who helped him and guided him, and who, yes, did tell him to keep his mask and his robe on. But despite that, the grandfather himself was, as far as we know, some kind of demon. And yet he did all of those things for Ike. And then we have Ike's boss and how she is aware of his secret. And I really find the dynamic for her very interesting because on one hand, she is willing to protect Ike's secret. She is willing to accept Ike despite his secret. And yet at the same time, we do see some of the impish mischief that we would normally associate with demons in her character, while at the same time she is actually very proud of Ike and his accomplishments, and she doesn't belittle or get upset about the fact that he wants to try and do things in ways that are probably not as normal for demons. Because we do get some examples on what would be more normal for demons, especially from the little pig man who is kind of Ike's supporter or right hand or whatever. and how he is talking about, well, should we kill all the humans? Should we torture them? Should we do this? Should we do that? And Ike is like, no, that's silly. If you kill all of the inhabitants of the town and you burn the town down, how do you get revenue from the town to be able to continue your war? It doesn't make any sense. And as the story goes along, little pig guy starts to really clue in on the fact that Ike seems very smart and very capable, and he seems to really admire Ike by the end of this episode. And I thought that was really funny. I also like how it had a demon twist on it, because not only did he think that Ike is very cool and interesting, but as a demon, because of his own ambition, his thought pattern went to, well, maybe Ike will be the demon lord someday. I don't think Ike has any interest in that personally, but to see the demon kind of put 2 and 2 together and get 5 because he's a demon instead of a human, and 2 plus 2 I'm using as like a human concept, was definitely an interesting thing. Equally interesting, though, was the demon lord herself, and the fact that she became almost immediately aware of the fact that Ike is wearing a mask. I liked 2 things about this. 1, she didn't just reach forward, grab it, and rip it off. And 2, she did indicate to him that she was aware that it was a mask and that she wants to see him without it. Which means that Ike now has to contemplate what he is doing, what the consequences of what he is doing are, how he's going to deal with this new situation, and it's going to be taking up space in his head, whereas a direct confrontation would have ended that tension immediately. And that lingering tension and that lingering thought process over this interaction with the demon lord, and that on top of, as I said, the reality that she is not what he expected her to be, is really interesting. We also hear, as we listen to Ike's thoughts, that he theorizes that she, like his grandfather and him, is likely aware of the ancient civilization that is tied into their world, and he figures that she is probably using knowledge related to that to help increase the likelihood of the battles and stuff that she has actually successfully won. Which is also very interesting, especially since the grandfather warned Ike that it's very important to be careful about utilizing information from this ancient civilization, because the grandfather was very concerned that that could lead to mass destruction for their world. Adding a touch more comedy and warmth to the series overall is the introduction of 13, or as we end up calling her, Sadie, who is going to end up being Ike's maid. And that might sound like a lowly or annoying position, or like, why would you want to be a demon lord's maid, even if he's not actually a demon and she ends up knowing that. But the thing is, one thing I find kind of strange and slightly concerning about Sadie is the reality that we have her introduced to us as 13, who didn't have an actual name because she was born a slave. Now, I've got nothing against stories having slaves in them. I mean, we all know that if you've been following my channel. But I'm somebody who really thinks that you need to think carefully when you use things, especially controversial things in fiction. And you should make sure you have a good reason, because they are things that can make a piece of fiction harder for more people to reach. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but there should be a good reason. I wonder whether there will be legitimate reasons, and whether we will find out more about Sadie's backstory or her overall life experiences that will actually enrich and enhance her character, or whether this was just dropped in for convenience. I also wonder how she got into the room to begin with, given the fact that this is Ike's most secret and treasured place that he safeguards and that he is comfortable taking his mask off in. Did she get there by accident? Was she warped there? Did somebody send her there? I wonder just what went down, and we did not find out, and that is a mystery I am actually very curious about. That all said, I will say that I actually really liked Sadie's character, and I really enjoyed the aspect of humor and levity that she added to the episode, because Most of the episode was very straight-laced and took itself rather seriously. Not to a negative degree, but to a degree where a comedic character like Sadie is going to be able to help even out the mood and the tone and keep this from being too serious for its own good, which I think is going to be a good thing, because while we do probably want some level of seriousness, we do not want this to be completely serious, at least in my opinion. I know I don't. The other big plus about this show that I actually really liked is the idea that this is not merely some fighting and combat series where that is the only draw. This is another world building and like civilization management series where we're actually dealing with Ike being a leader in a set area and defending a set area. We see at the end of the episode that he has gotten what could either be considered a reward or a punishment from the Demon Lord, where he is going to be responsible for a town on the border of the demon's land, and he's going to need to find ways to fortify and protect that area from potential attack by humans. I think it'll be very interesting to see how he goes about that, and I think that we already start to see some very unique things about him in this episode. For example, he actually kind of made me think of, some of you probably haven't seen this, but there was an old 1950s movie called The Ten Commandments, and one of the key aspects of that is that at one point in the story, Moses is actually a prince of Egypt, and in contrast to the actual prince, Ramses, Moses does certain things, like he says like the grain that is stored inside of a temple will do just as well in the belly of a slave. He wants to make sure they have food, or he gives them a day off so that they can rest and recuperate. Ike actually kind of makes me think of that, because what Ike does when he realizes that his new city is going to need better fortifications is that he actually wants to get these walls built. And when he asks his people how long they predict it'll take to build these walls, they say 6 months. And he's like, my guy, that's too long. But what does he do? Well, he says, why don't we do this? Let's get the humans and the demons to work on it. And then he organizes his people into shifts so that people are working for 8 hours and they're going in cycles, which means day and night they can hypothetically have people working because they've doubled or tripled their workload, because it's humans and demons and they all have different body shapes and sizes and can do different tasks. And they're all getting proper rest, nourishment, and care because he actually has them on work cycles rather than working people until they drop dead or something, which is probably more so what demons would do if they took humans as slaves. Overall, I think that this is off to a pretty solid start. I like the blend between a slight pinch of comedy, more serious and interesting social and political consideration, this tinge of possible past versus future or post-apocalyptic vibes with the civilization, and of course the fine line that our main character Ike is going to need to walk if he wants to keep his secret, while also having the question and possibility of how well he can actually trust the allies who find out his secret. I like the fact that there are already characters who know. This isn't doing a vampire dormitory where absolutely nobody knows the secret, because to me, I actually strongly prefer that somebody know the secret, because it offers so much more in the way of being able to have a confidant and to have support and to have trust. But it also potentially provides the possibility of some form of fear of betrayal or miscommunication, as we see with either Ike's boss or with Sadie, and the fact that that is why she is a maid is because he's very concerned that she could potentially spill his secret. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of this, but now I'd like to know what you guys think. Did any of you watch this? Did you enjoy this episode? Who's your favorite character so far? What do you think we're going to see coming forward? I'd love to know, so drop a comment below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Talk to you later. Bye!